Good morning, everyone. Should get started. So I hope yesterday you had a good day of work, but also had time to enjoy the evening. So we will start with this, but before I'll introduce the speaker, let me ask, who is familiar with this graph? It's like innovation, adoption, life cycle, or law of diffusion of innovation. How many hands? Okay. So the reason why I put this up is that, this represents how any innovation penetrates market. So you will have innovators that are the ones that are more ready to explore new things. And once the innovator have confirmed the validity of, they tried those things, then you have the early adopters, and once those are bought in, then you start moving into the majority. And any innovation follows this pattern and market penetration. And the reason why I see it is that maybe certain constrictive laws do not follow, obviously, this cycle. They apply to everyone. But carbon farming is an innovation as any other. So the diffusion, the uptake of carbon farming will look like this at some point. And I think we are still very much in the innovator phase. And it's my recommendation that in this moment, we contribute to build a system that appeals to the innovators. Because if we build a system that appeals to the majority, we may fail to have the innovators in. And the majority will just not buy it if the innovators haven't tried it first. And this is another reason why I think perhaps it's a bit too early to think about carbon pricing, which obviously farmers have to look at the economic of things. But if you think, one classical example is those people that have, the first people that have bought a telephone. They bought a telephone and they didn't have anyone to call. So perhaps they didn't look at the price as a barrier. And this is why we wanted to have a session with farmers that are, in our view, innovating in their space. They have demonstrated that they are trying to do things differently, that they're trying to create a community around them to move the sectors in doing things differently. And it's going to just be a dialogue between them. So I'll invite them on stage, and I'll introduce them. So I'll start with Sheila, which is clearly recognizable. She's a third-generation farmer and social entrepreneur in the agri-food sector and civic engagement field in Greece. Her key focuses lie within a lived physical and social environment, namely the farming and rural communities, and thus a systemic approach to enable transition towards regeneration in an holistic way. Her dedication to soil and ecosystem restoration translates into her dedication to transforming the farming sector in Greece through the initiative called Regenerative Farming Greece. Thank you. Then on her right side, we have Ian Tolhurst. He has been at the forefront of the UK organic movement for almost 50 years. His 8-hectare farms has won many awards for its innovative approach to crop production, utilizing diversity as at its heart to develop soil health and fertility. Long-term monitoring of carbon and soil has shown the benefit of this system, and the integration of crops, a system approach to pest and disease management and biodiversity makes for a fascinating and durable agricultural system. On the far end, we have Mateusz Czesnocha. Very good. He's a farmer from Poland on a mission of building a farmer-centric bridge between agriculture and climate policy. He leaves his call to action through two businesses, the European Carbon Farmers and the Farmer Francesco. Mateusz is an advisory board in many organizations, for example, the Foundation of Economy of Francesco, the Laudato Si Action Platform at the Holy See, and the EU Soil Mission. And then these three farmers, the conversation would be moderated by Rob Smith, on my right. He's a hugely experienced broadcaster and host, having worked as a journalist and presenter on TV and the radio with the BBC in the UK for over 25 years. He's a passionate advocate for environmental protection, hosting the Talk on the Wild Side podcast that explore how we can balance human needs with sustainable practices. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Dublin. How are we feeling today? Did you manage to escape the joys of Temple Bar? I'm really pleased to see so many of you actually here this morning. I was a bit worried it'd just be the four of us on the stage and somebody slumped over a half-empty pint of Guinness. But it's great to see so many of you here today. Before I get into the conversation, I just want to speak just for a very brief moment to explain why I'm here. Because I'm not a farmer, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a policy maker. Why the hell am I here? Well, as Tristano said, I come from a background of journalism as a broadcaster and presenter with the BBC for many, many years. And I left the BBC a few years ago, and when I did, I had a lot of really deep, troubling questions in my mind around the state of the world, the state of the environment, and where we're going with everything. And I wanted to answer some fundamental questions about whether or not it's too late, whether or not we're in a kind of disaster zone, and we might as well just pack up. And as part of the things that I've been doing since leaving the BBC, I created a podcast for my local wildlife trust in Kent, which is in the southeast of England. And it really struck me that since officially something like 69% of the whole landmass of the UK is covered by farmland, it wouldn't make sense to talk about anything to do with the environment without talking to farmers. Not just talking about wildlife, but you have to talk to the farmers because they're the people that manage the land. If you want to talk about biodiversity or any of those things, you have to talk to farmers. And as part of that, I ended up having a conversation with this man in the middle here, Ian Tolhurst, who you will hear in a few moments' time really is quite a remarkable chap. In fact, I mean, Sheila is really quite a remarkable woman. Matthias is also a remarkable individual. But the conversation that I had with Ian that we recorded was heard by Tristano, and he wanted me to kind of bring a little bit of that conversation to you all here. I did sit on a couple of plenary sessions yesterday afternoon, and what you won't hear so much of is acronyms. Because what I have learnt by sitting in some of the sessions that were going on yesterday is that carbon farming study involves quite a lot of harvesting and stockpiling of acronyms. And people within their particular sphere know exactly what they're talking about. And if you don't know exactly what you're talking about, then it can be baffling. So I am bringing to this my professional, studied, intelligent, hopefully, ignorance. As a journalist, that's what you do. You ask stupid questions, bleeding obvious questions, because I can guarantee that there will be things that are talked about on the stage which people within their sphere know it, and a lot of other really bright people in this room are like, no, don't really know what that is. I'm going to hopefully ask those stupid questions in an intelligent enough way that you will all gain something from it. So that's the point of actually doing this. One of the acronyms that I did learn is MRV, which doesn't stand for mildly risque vegetable, I'm pleased to say, but it is measurement, reporting, and validation. And that really is right at the heart of the point of this conversation this morning, because the role of innovative farmers, and these guys all really are innovative in their own way, in actually paving the way towards climate positive agriculture, if we're going to be talking about the role that they have, and as Tristano said, this 2.5% thing of innovators, you have to get those people doing stuff and then get other people on board as we're going on. If you can't find ways of measuring and reporting and validating farmers for doing things that are climate positive, then it's really hard to pay them for it. And without a genuinely profitable business model, then farmers can't farm and the whole thing falls apart in any case. So we'll start off having a bit of a chat with each of the farmers here first of all, to give you a bit more of an idea of who they are, what they do, why they do it. and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty. So there we go. That's the lengthy preamble over. Ian, I'll start with you on the basis that I've actually been... Age before beauty, yeah. No, I've actually been to Ian's farm. So you're in just west of London, in Oxfordshire. Talk us through what your operation is, because it's really quite a small-scale farm, but small but mighty. I think it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, we're very small. We're less than 10 hectares. We are predominantly vegetable producers. We've been on this particular site for almost 40 years. I've been in organic growing since 1976, so next year is our 50th anniversary. I came into agriculture when climate change hadn't been invented. There was no term about climate change. So we didn't come into organic agriculture because we wanted to put the climate right, because we didn't know it was wrong. I've had a very long career, and I've been instrumental in many changes on our farm. We took on a farm which was conventionally managed. We converted it to organic. We have a systems approach on the farm. So we look at the farm as a complete organism. We don't look at the farm in terms of independent components. We look at the farm as a whole. So we try to measure the farm in the way it works within biodiversity. Biodiversity is the driver of the farm system. So biodiversity from the soil, from the fungi, the bacteria, the organisms in the soil, right up to the top of the trees where we have bird life and insect activity. We look at this as a complete and total system. We grow crops within that. We're on relatively poor land. We have developed a almost near to self-sufficient system in terms of we don't bring fertility into the farm. We have no livestock. We don't rely on animal manures. We don't rely on any form of fertilizer. We don't use any sprays of any type, organic or otherwise. So the farm is almost ring-fenced from the exterior, apart from we obviously bring in some fuel, some electricity and labour, of course, but we all live on the farm as well. So the farm is a kind of a unit, a biological unit. And within that, we grow our vegetables, we have our crops, we also have other activities. We have farm tours, we do consultancy advisory work, we have food events, and we're very much linked to local communities. So what we produce on the farm is sold within a 15-kilometre radius of the farm, so very much about the ethos of the farm is to try and be local. And we're really looking at our long-term carbon. We've been measuring carbon for many years, both in terms of what we can put back and also what we waste in terms of the production. So we have a very clear picture. We've got a lot of very interesting data. We had a very good deep carbon survey done 3 years ago, which was able to compare our farm with a neighbouring farm which was running a different system. And the farm is pretty much dependent on trees, where we've planted over 2,000 trees within this 10 hectares. And these trees provide nutrients, they provide biological function, and they provide carbon. So we kind of look at the farm as a complete organism. This is the most important thing I see within our farm, is this whole systems approach.
And just to sort of give a clear idea of the kind of stuff you're actually growing on your farm, it's remarkably dense levels of planting and incredible variety of crops that you're producing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're producing almost 100 different types of vegetables and some fruit. We do it all year round. We work 52 weeks a year. We supply vegetables throughout the whole season. It's very diverse, and within those different vegetables we have different varieties as well. So it's a very complex and quite sometimes chaotic system to manage, but it does sort of work in a bizarre sort of way. We produce around 120 tons of food every year, and I do mention food because sometimes farmers forget they are actually producing food. Sometimes they think they're producing a commodity. We don't see it as a commodity. We see it as a food item, and we have very close links with our customers, who we see really as our partners to the farm. We don't see them just as people to sell vegetables to. They're very much a part of our farm system as well.
And you sell kind of exclusively locally, don't you?
We sell within about 10 or 15 kilometres of the farm, so 80% is sold even closer than that. So it's very much a local production.
Great. Okay. So that gives a brief thumbnail sketch of what Ian does. Sheila, perhaps I'll come to you now. So you're in a very different part of the world. You're in the South Peloponnese of Greece. You've come up yesterday. It was beautiful and warm and sunny where you've come from. Welcome to Dublin. So give us a bit of an idea about your operation, what you actually do.
Yes. So yeah, my context is quite different. We're in a very rural agricultural area in the south of Peloponnese. The farm has been in my grandfather's hands already. It has very old grown olive trees, hundreds of years old, and was then interplanted with citrus trees by my father and my uncle, who were also one of the first organic farmers in Greece. So I kind of grew up with this feeling of we do things very different than everybody else anyway, which I think helped me a lot to feel comfortable in doing what I do at the moment. But something very interesting happened on our farm in 2015 after already 35 years of being organic. And this is we grafted all of our citrus trees, almost all of them, because the variety didn't work for us also economically. And after us grafting the trees, something remarkable happened on our farm. Everywhere, mulberries and fig trees started growing. And it was just the time when I took over the farm. My father passed away. So I was a bit trying to understand what is happening on my farm. Of course, I asked a lot of experts all over Greece, but everybody was telling me something different. Some people said, you have to cut all these trees, they will suck all the nutrients from your main crop. Other people said, if they're within this distance and that distance. So I realized, nobody can really help me, and I need to try to listen to the land. But yeah, from my surrounding, there was a lot of inducing fear, and if you're not going to cut the trees, you're going to lose your land, you're going to lose all your crops. So you need a lot of what we say in Greek, psychremia, keep cool nerves when all the surrounding is panicking. Also, we had a big plague of grasshoppers that were literally eating every single leaf from our newly grafted trees. So it was quite a stressful situation in theory. But what we also did at the same time, we interplanted a lot of other different fruit trees and support species, because I just love trees and diversity. I'm a plant freak. So yeah, I want to have all kinds of trees on my farm. But it was just later that I discovered agroforestry as a concept, and I realized, perfect, these mulberries and fig trees, they are actually the support species my farming operation was missing in the first place. So it's again a remarkable confirmation that nature knows in a way what she's doing, and we just need to try to understand what are the workings and how can we integrate them into our farming operation that it works for us as well. At the moment our farm is extremely dense as well, just like Ian's, a very high biodiversity. Within these trees that we added, there are also a lot of additional crops that we can market and sell. So we have also the mulberries now that we are selling. We have pomegranates. We have lots of different herbs that we interplanted. We also produce vegetables, but mainly for us. And we also receive a lot of visitors on the farm, even though we're not really set up for it, but we just can't say no. And we host a lot of trainings also on our farm, because we see that in the region there's no one to support you in changing your farming operation. Everybody's pushing you towards using chemicals. Even though they know you're organic, they will just tell you, don't worry, nobody will discover it, it's going to be fine. It will disappear in 20 days. And then you ask, disappear where? They say, it's going to be gone. And I said, gone where? So you very soon hit a barrier there of understanding and questioning further. And
in terms of the visual appearance of how you grow, there's a lot of height. It's not where most farms, single crop farms, if it's a field of wheat, it's a field of wheat. Your farm does not look like that at all, does it?
Not at all. We also interplanted with a lot of eucalyptus and poplars to be the emergent layers. So you will see a lot of very high trees. Underneath you will see high layers like mulberries and fig trees and olive trees, and a lot of different types of acacias. And underneath we also have low layer herbs and shrubs. We even put some cotton shrubs in our farm, just because most of people have never seen a cotton plant while we wear it every day. We also see all this effect that the different tree layers have on bird diversity, on insect diversity. We recently had researchers on our farm analyzing the the pollinator diversity, and it was just remarkable what they found out. Sometimes I have agronomists coming to our land and they discover some insect that is actually protecting our main crop from a pest, and I'm like, oh yeah, great to know it's here. I didn't intend for it, so there's not so much planning in our operation, but we just see that biodiversity solves a lot of the problems by itself. So even if you don't have access to a lot of experts and researchers, if you follow nature's laws, also integrating biodiversity, things will go much better.
And one of the other things that you kind of accidentally discovered, so Greece had some really horrible heat waves a couple of years ago, to the daytime temperatures of 50 degrees Celsius. Your farm actually did a lot better in those conditions than a lot of your neighbours.
Yeah, we saw that all the high layers that we have, they basically create a microclimate and they protect us from the heat, from the wind. So also we can choose when we prune the high layer above our main crop, and we don't prune it before summer because we need the protection from the heat. Also we integrate a lot of organic matter into our ground, so we prune very heavily in autumn our support species. We shred them, the prunings, and we mulch the ground. So it's a perfect sponge for humidity, and we do need to irrigate a lot less than we used to, so we can really see the difference.
Great stuff. Matthias, let's paint a picture of a completely different kind of a farming environment. So you're in the far north of Poland, on a floodplain delta of the Vistula River. What do you farm there? Paint a picture of what your farm looks like.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the session. Thank you, Tristano, for the introduction and invitation. Yes, our farm is completely different to the farms that we've just visited, and I invite you to visit our farm. It is embedded in one of the most productive, agriculturally wise regions of Poland. So Poland has few regions with very, very fertile soil. We are in one of those, in the very north. Think about our region as the Netherlands that you would typically paint, and the region actually was created or the water drained by the Mennonites who were coming from the Netherlands. Having that said, our land within that very fertile area is on the poor side, sandy, very mosaic, so changes from meter to meter, very flat, below the seawater level. Historically, this land has been grazed for animals, and they were meadows. However, when we've been entering into that land in the 70s and then onwards, that land was already turned into arable land, and we've been effectively, I'm not afraid to use this word right now, fighting with the ecosystem. There was always, or most of the time, there was water standing in the field in the spring when we needed to start the field works. Or was already standing in the fields when we needed to harvest. So it was effectively a struggle, but that was the mode that we were in. We were producing cereals, and that was what was possible. Then in 2004 and onwards, Poland enters the European Union, and completely new array of opportunities is being presented to us. Within the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, which I hope is known to everyone, and if it is not, it is critical for understanding farmer change at farm level. CAP is the most important thing or policy that you need to understand, and in case one of you or some of you don't know it, you really need to know it in order to talk about and do carbon farming wisely in the European Union context. But we have the CAP, and unlike vast majority of the farmers, we use this moment for deep transition. So instead of producing more of what we were producing by having this injection of cash that was possible, we said to ourselves, without really kind of knowing what we are doing, but just following the logic of trying to think clear, hey, can we lower our dependencies? Can we transform that model? So we did, and first stage of innovation or change was still growing cereals, but adding cover crops, extending rotation, seeding spring cereals. That had fundamental impact on our cash flow, especially. So we went out of the debt that we were in back then, And since then, since 2004, we are cash positive. Our cash flow is positive. That means we can take decisions that make sense, not that we are forced to take. And then from 2008 onwards, we transitioned the farm further to effectively permanent grasslands. So coming back to where that land was historically, because it was too wet to be farmed anyway. Now it's not too wet any longer, but and actually re-wetting that would be something that the region would need at the landscape level. So now we are producing we are producing hay of the highest quality, delivered locally in Poland and internationally if there's a need for the market. Our farm is divided in 5 bigger blocks. So within this extremely intensively farmed region, you have those 5 spots of land where wild animals can rest when all the other farmers are plowing or are the fields are black, effectively. And since 2022, as part of European Carbon Farmers, one of the businesses that I'm running, we have agroforestry project on that land dealing with production of industrial crops, hay and poplar biomaterial for the purpose of bioeconomy. Yesterday in the opening session, there was this point being made by Christian from DG Klima that bioeconomy and net zero creates tremendous opportunity for farmers, and we are doing that on our own farm. Also sharing with the others how that path could look like. And when I close my eyes and think about our farm in 20 years' time, what is clear to me, also listening to Ian and Sheila, we will definitely have much more trees, because this is what just makes sense for that ecosystem.
So I just want to be clear on your current primary crop then is hay.
Yes.
So what does your fields look like? How do you physically manage that? How big an area are we talking about that you're managing?
700 hectares.
700 hectares.
Of meadow, so permanent grassland. We sown once in 2008, and then that land has never been tilled. So it is storing and capturing more and more carbon as the years go. We are reseeding different mixes of grass, so improving the quality of those meadows. And we are cutting them 2 times per year after the 15th of July each year. So we are protecting nesting habitats for certain species of birds that are present in that area. And then depending on weather conditions, the rainfall, mainly the rainfall, we would start cutting once again in early August to do the second cut of hay.
And on the economic side of stuff, you said that you've been cash positive since 2004. So you're making money. This is actually a commercial operation. And how does the economics work? Is your primary money coming actually from the crop, or is that coming from European funding pots? How do you actually balance the books?
We are making most source of revenue is selling the hay. And it took time to transition. Back then, when we've been doing cereals, the biggest source of revenue were cereals, but they were making very little money. During 2004 to probably 2015, because of the transition and less work on our farm, but having a lot of machines, and the need also to deal with straw that was left after harvest time, because we changed our tillage practices and we were not plowing deeply, so we needed to take that straw from the field. We developed a straw trading business, and we've been very big in that in our region. That provided the cash to finance the changes that we were undertaking on the farm. And now we are back to not a contractor model, but a model in which we own land, we operate it, it makes money, and we have clients for what we are producing who are stable clients.
Great.
Because we are supplying their needs.
Okay, so I want to move on a little bit now then to kind of motivation, because as Tristano said with his graph in the first place, you have innovators, and then you have the people, the early adopters, and then you have the early majority. And we want to get to the point where we're starting to get more and more people actually on board with having these kinds of thought processes. But that could be difficult because you're asking them to kind of swim against the tide a little bit, and I'm sure you've all experienced that kind of swimming against the tide of what your neighbours think, of what the nitrate selling companies think, all those kind of operations. So let's talk a little bit about motivation. Ian, you didn't come from a farming background, did you?
No, I'm from a working class background, which is fairly unusual in the organic world of agriculture. No history anywhere in my family of farming. And I fell into agriculture almost by mistake. But I'd always wanted to get into farming. I'd like the idea of farming. The present farm we don't own. We are tenant farmers, so we have to pay rent. We have a very good arrangement with the landlord. So we are perhaps in a slightly different position. The farm is economically viable, just about. But the driver for me really was about bird life. I was very keen as a child on ornithology. I studied birds. And I realized that birds were being damaged by the environment and the effects that farming was having on the environment. So that was really my initial driver. And the birds on our farm are still very important because they're a really good indicator of the health of the system. But also we look at earthworms because they're a really good indicator of the health of the system. So the innovation for me really came from the ground up. So earthworms, if I was to quote any particular insect or animal within my farm that drove me to where I am, it's the earthworm. Which is one of the most humble creatures you can have, but also one of the most important creatures we have. I could speak all day about earthworms, but I'm not going to.
And in terms then of the motivation of why you're doing it the way you are, this comes from in here first and foremost, isn't it? It's not a cash operation first. It's that you have a kind of a lifestyle philosophy that you brought to it.
Yes, it is a philosophy. I mean, we have to make the farm pay its way, of course. We're not able to run it otherwise. We haven't until this year had any grant support at all. UK did a stupid thing a few years ago and left the EU, but we weren't getting money even in those days. But we are, from this year, we do get some payments. So the inner drive really was the desire to farm in a way which protected nature as much as anything. But as a spin-off from that was protection of humans in terms of the food they eat. That is also very important to me. So again, it's about the whole system of the farm.
And Sheila, you said you inherited your farm, so you did grow up in a farming environment, but you've chosen to manage the farm in a different way to all of your neighbours. So what was your motivation for actually doing that?
Yeah, so actually I didn't grow up so much in a farming environment. I mean, my dad was a farmer, and I was born in a way into the farm. But then I actually left, and I was 20 years in Germany. And then when I came back, I re-entered this farming society, having a background in sociology, which was actually very, very interesting. But in regards to my motivation, I don't know, I was just raised in a way that you do what makes sense. You do something that is logic, that is not against nature. So having been given the responsibility to steward the farm, it was just the only thing I could do. And I think looking at the graph with the innovators, I'm very good that you showed it actually, Tristano. I think that's a common characteristic among all the people that are into regenerative agriculture, that our motivation is not an economic one. Otherwise, we would be doing other jobs in cities, I guess. But I think it's very important to keep this in mind whenever you speak with the innovators and the early adopters, that their motivation is not money. So if you come to them with a profit mindset in a way, there will be already a huge language barrier. And I see this in myself whenever I speak with someone where the motivation is money. I'm like, you're not our kind of people. I think it's very important to keep this in mind, that we aim to do something that we feel it's good for the planet, it's good for the people, and is fair in a way.
Okay, and Matthias, how about you? What's your motivation for doing things the way you are doing them?
I'm reflecting whether I am an early adopter by the lens of a monetary approach, because finance is very important for us. For us, it is a basis which allows us to do other things. And very often when we are thinking about new ventures on the farm, which we are thinking about all the time, and there are things coming that appear in the head, hey, why don't we do that? Or other people coming saying, hey, why don't you do that with us? the financial analysis part of that is very important. Like, hey, how much it will cost me? What is the expected revenue? How do I complicate my system? Complicate, and there are two ways of complicating. The complication or adding complexity to the ecosystem, which is good, we want that, and adding complexity to the finances and dependencies and so on that we are much less excited about taking. So our motivation is, at the core of it, doing the best job we can. I think that's how it was with my grandfather and my dad, and now me. My dad is still involved in the farm, and we farm together with my brother and uncle. So it's a truly family enterprise, which also means you have to connect and align with those others who might have different way of thinking. But then my personal motivation is rooted on that, in that experience of seeing, and we talked preparing the session, is rooted in seeing my family trying to do a really good job, being laughed at by others, and me personally as well, because you are from the farming family, therefore you are worse. And then actually going out of that small circle in Poland and then going outside to study and learning that, hey, actually climate change is cool, climate change as well, that agriculture is cool, and agriculture is critical and can be critical part of solution to a lot of challenges / opportunities that we have. Therefore, I, Mateusz Ciesnocha, make a decision that this is the sector that I am not only born into, that's true as well, but I choose that sector. It is my choice. I'm staying here by choice, not because I have to or I would not make it somewhere else. And then since then, you continue proactively searching for opportunities, build partnerships to live your mission effectively, which, as Tristano mentioned at the beginning, is to build a bridge between climate and agricultural policy. And we are using carbon farming as a language, as a tool to build that bridge.
So, neighbours. Let's talk about neighbours, because as an early adopter or as an innovator, you're prepared to go out on a limb for a whole bunch of reasons that you've articulated yourselves. It means something to you to do it, and you're prepared to put yourself out there. What kind of reactions do you get from the people who are farming the land around you, your peers, if you like? Do they look at you and think, oh, they're doing something interesting? Or do they look at you and think, they're mental, they're doing something odd? And how difficult, how complicated has that relationship been with your neighbours? Sheila, perhaps if you go first.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question. So I think our neighbors, they can also be put on this graph in one of the many areas. So of course we have the people who are completely ignoring what we're doing. And even when speaking with us, it seems like they are not even seeing that we do things differently. I have one neighbor, very direct neighbor, and he stands before me and he says, but you cannot farm in a different way than using a lot of chemicals. And I mean, we're farming differently since 35 years. So obviously there's not a lot of open-mindedness to even communicate a lot of things. But there are neighbors who come to us, they're very curious, they want to understand, they realize that we have found some solutions, so they ask basically for support and guidance. And yeah, that feels very good to have such neighbors around you. But I have to say, in the beginning, when I did the transition, in a way, I created a bubble around me, trying to ignore all the rest of the local world, because in a way you grow and you nurture something that is fragile in the beginning. You are not sure yourself. You don't have all this information that we have now, so you need to protect in a way this thing that you grow. So you need this protective bubble and ignoring all the rest. But I also do have to say that it's very helpful to have access to other pioneers. And when I look back at my innovation path, this is what helped me a lot, to have access to some people that were also innovating in their own context in other countries very often. And this is also a question that I pose myself. What is the ecosystem that farmers need in order to be able to innovate? Not all the farmers will innovate, but at least the innovators and the early adopters, what kind of ecosystem do they need around them in order to be able to innovate? And this is, I think, what we need to create.
And so doing stuff like this is helpful for you kind of mentally and emotionally to be able to connect with other people who are making those innovations.
In a way, yes, also. A lot of other factors as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And over time, have some of those attitudes of your neighbours shifted? Are they starting to look at what you're doing and thinking, well, hang on a minute, we could do things differently?
Yeah, I think especially if you do it in the long term, and this is also why in the beginning we were not very vocal about it, because you need to prove yourself. You cannot start a different path and then wanting to preach already to everybody. But in a way you have to prove with practices what you do and that it works. And we see that more and more people come to us also because we stood through a lot of crisis, and our farming operation was not impacted by it negatively. So of course people start looking at us and start, wanting to learn from us.
And Matthias, your situation, because Poland obviously went through the Soviet era and there was collective farming and all those kind of things. What's the attitude like with your neighbouring farmers? Are there still hangovers from those days, or are people much more open-minded in Poland about how to farm things going forward?
Yes, we are open-minded when it comes to farming. I think I will refer back to a conversation I had with French farmers yesterday who were on stage saying, hey, we were working with Polish farmers and the level of openness is crazy. You achieve things when it comes to regeneration in 2 years that you don't see in France. So that comes to mind kind of as a specific example, but reflecting on our own experience, we get all sorts of, similar to Sheila and similar to how you framed the question, Rob, we get all sorts of responses from you are mental to that's interesting, and that's very often coming from the same person, like, hey, this is crazy, but hey, they are doing that, it works. Just like when I look at other farms, right, I'm like, hey, this is crazy. It's a relationship that what comes to mind. And in our specific particular case, we do have relationships with farmers in the area, and they are very diverse farms, family-owned, corporate farms. We have investment funds that own land in our region that are our neighbor. We know them, we know their headquarters. We visited their farms in Brazil, for example, as well. So we are I'm very happy to reflect and say, hey, actually we do have those relationships. And when there's an innovation of some sort, it is shared with the community, if you will. And then some will take it and go with it in that direction. Some will go with it in another direction or not take it at all. But we do meet, we share, and that is happening informal and very important as well, informal settings. I'm happy to say that the transition that we went on, there's one other farm of friends that are farming like 80 kilometers away that also did similar very crazy thing, because it was a crazy thing back then in 2004 and then 2008 to say, hey, we are switching completely the model of production that we are in. We will not need a cultivator, a seeder, a sprayer, a fertilizer spreader, and a harvester. Now we are producing grass or hay. That was mental, and it worked out for us because when we've been looking at how it looks like, it sounded to be too good to be true, but it turned out to be exactly like that.
And Ian, your setup is slightly different because the land, and you mentioned it a little bit, it's part of it is classified as grade 4, which is the lowest grading of productive land. And part of it is within a kind of an old stately home walled garden, isn't it? So your relationship with your neighbours is probably slightly different from the off.
Yes, we have a completely different relationship with our neighbours from the other two. One of my neighbours, very luckily, is an organic farmer as well, so we get on extremely well. His farm is completely different from mine. He has 200 hectares. It's a beef farm. It's a very low input beef farm. It's virtually all grass. There's almost no crops. The area, because of where we farm, it's very much low-grade land, so there isn't really much high-tech agriculture. We are the only people growing vegetables. So our neighbours think we're probably slightly odd because we are growing vegetables, but we have a different relationship with neighbours which are much further away. I've grown up in the organic movement. I've been there right from its inception in the 70s. I was there to set and establish organic standards. So I have a community of organic farmers that I've known for a very long period of time. And many of these people visit our farm. They come for inspiration. Some of them will say, well, I don't think this is for me. This is not the system I want to adopt. And some will adopt certain parts of our system. So our relationship with neighbours is quite different in many ways. And we don't like to compare ourselves with other farmers in terms of we are better or we are worse than other farmers. We think all farmers are in a very challenging situation no matter what they farm. So for us, neighbours are very important, but it's also very important for us to be part of that wider community of people who are working towards innovation, who are changing agricultural systems, and also who are changing the mindset of people who buy the produce that we farm. I think this is important to us. So education is very much a part of our neighbourly motivation as well, really.
Carbon farming, that's what the title of this is a summit is all about. And Matthias, I'll probably start with you because you've probably got the most overt connection with carbon farming as a concept. What does carbon farming actually mean to you?
For me, carbon farming is a language, and I strongly believe, and challenge me on this one, please do if you think otherwise, that every farmer of the world is a carbon farmer, because whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, your farm is embedded in an ecosystem. And one of the characteristics of the ecosystem are cycles of nature, including carbon cycle. So you are a carbon farmer because you are embedded in that ecosystem. And now that we know that you are a carbon farmer, the question is what kind of carbon farmer you are. Are you positively contributing to the cycle, so then you are regenerated from that perspective? Are you sustainable or are you negative? On average, especially unfortunately when it comes to the reality of my country, farmers are negative carbon farmers. They are contributing negatively to the carbon cycle, especially by depleting carbon stocks of soil, by tillage practices that they are using. We are, I would like to say, this carbon farmer that is delivering positive results when it comes to that dimension of looking at the farm. And so we were kind of called by policymakers in different processes, including UNFCCC, the Climate Convention of the United Nations, to share that experience in those spaces, and then more followed from that, including creation of a business that is doing advocacy in that space and showing with our own example and many, many other examples of farmers that, hey, you can produce highest quality food, as Ian is saying and showing, and steward the ecosystem at the same time. And actually, we strongly believe there's no other way. Like, we have to produce food in a way that is stewarding ecosystem, there's no contradiction between the two. Any contradiction is kind of man-made and is not the right way to go. So carbon farming is a language, especially useful at the policy level, and is a tool, as has been mentioned many, many times in this summit and other spaces. It is a tool. It is a very useful tool right now because the topic is hot and the climate conversation is hot. The future of farming is hot, and we have an urgent job to do to bridge those two conversations, because otherwise we all fail.
So, Ian, are you a carbon farmer?
Well, apparently so. I mean, I've only recently realised I'm a carbon farmer, but I like to think of it in terms of the carbon farming part of what we do is a part of a system. So we are not just farming for carbon. We are farming for a whole range of aspects on the farm, which biodiversity is one of those drivers. I think there's a danger here in using the expression carbon farming. I think Matthew summed it up very well, in that farmers are now expected to try to put right all the ills of the last 250 years of the Industrial Revolution, that we're going to dump all the carbon in the atmosphere back into farmland. We're not. It's not possible. It's not practically possible. It's not theoretically possible. We can put some back. We certainly have to farm in a way that is not exploiting carbon. We have to farm in a way which is at least carbon zero, if not carbon positive. This is quite a challenge. So I don't want farmers to think that they're suddenly going to be heralded as the great savers of the planet in terms of climate change. They're not. They are part of that solution, but not a whole part of that solution. They're going to need enormous amount of help to get this right. So for me, carbon on the farm is very much a part of what we do, but it's a part of that whole system. We need to farm in a positive way for carbon. You know, it's really important. We need to measure how much we put back. This is really difficult. To do this over short periods of time span is almost impossible given the technology. So, you know, we do face a challenge in terms of monitoring and measuring what we actually do on the farm, but it's incredibly important. The great thing about carbon farming is that people realize there is some future left in the planet. We can do something about it. So, again, it's really just a part of a much larger system.
And Sheila, how about you? What does carbon farming mean as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I also believe that it's basically a language, and it's a language that works on the policy level, that works with researchers, but I really doubt that it's a language that works with farmers. At least with farmers in my region, it wouldn't work. When I first came across the term, I'm like, okay, you care about carbon, but you don't care about all the chemicals that we farmers are exposed to. It feels a bit off, I have to say, because the cancer rates, for example, in my region are very much higher than in any other region. And it does feel a bit unfair to suddenly focus on carbon, but to completely leave the discussion out about chemical use in agriculture and the effects it has on the rural populations, which are feeding, in a way, the world. So I do think that we need to, I mean, it's also a language that works very well in our segregated world that still, we don't have so much interdisciplinary work, and our institutions are not set up to look at ecosystems and to look at all the different disciplines that come together. But I think in a way this is where we need to go to. And I also don't perceive on my farm that I'm doing carbon farming. I'm trying to steward a healthy ecosystem. And this is my guiding reference in a way. Does this ecosystem look and feel healthy? And do I see diseases come up, or do I have actually a healthy immune system? This is what's guiding me. So to only look at carbon, it feels it's not going to really go into the healthy direction that we need to go. So I think we all have a challenge to do in how to be more holistic in our approaches when it also comes to policy and to research, because we cannot look at things separate from others. Everything is interlinked, and you see this so much on the farm level, which is teaching you a lot about this.
I'm going to start asking you to ask questions fairly shortly. So I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff that you've heard that you'll be itching to put your hands up and ask some stuff. So start having a think about what it is you do want to ask of our panel here. I do just want to sort of briefly address the elephant in the room, or perhaps I should say the cow in the room, because all three of you are farming without livestock. Is it possible to have a meaningful conversation around carbon-related matters in agriculture without talking about livestock farming? Sheila?
Yes. Actually, we are in the process of bringing animals into our farming operation because we just do see that the ecosystem is not very efficient if you take out the animals. For me, they are part of a healthy ecosystem. Mm-hmm. I mean, now we have grasses growing up till here, even taller than me, and you just see it looks delicious, and you're sure for some animals out there it would be. Then you have to come with a machine and cut the grass. It makes a lot of noise. It needs gas. It just doesn't feel so logic. And when you have in mind to steward a healthy ecosystem, at some point you come to the conclusion, okay, the animals, now it's time. So we are going to integrate animals.
What animals are you thinking of integrating?
We're going to experiment, of course, a lot again. We're going to use a range of animals like sheep and geese and ducks and chickens and all sorts. And also because we do live on the farm, sometimes we had animals visiting us in a way. And you feel that it feels right. You know, you have another animal in close proximity that just feels healthy.
And will some of those animals end up in the food chain, or will they just be farm maintenance machines?
So in our case, I don't think they will end up in the food chain because I'm vegetarian. So yeah, they will keep us company, but we will see how it's gonna work management-wise. Also, I have some cousins that are shepherds, so we might also borrow some animals. It's also a very interesting concept to collaborate with your neighbors that might have animals and to integrate them into your farm, to graze quickly through your farm, and then but in my area we don't have enough shepherds anymore, so it is a problem that also contributes to fire hazards. So we have a big work to do there as well.
Ian, how about you?
Right, well, I have a perhaps slightly different approach. We have farmed for many, many decades without livestock, and we've been able to prove that you do not have to have livestock to maintain soil health, or to maintain or improve carbon, or to grow healthy, profitable crops. So that technology is possible, it can be done. We choose not to, partly for practical reasons originally, but also because every report that comes out about diets and global food supply is quite clear in that we have to think clearly in the long term about reduction of livestock, because the pressure on the planet is horrendous. 80-odd% of all farmland is producing livestock products, which produces around 18% of the calories. So clearly there's a huge imbalance. So we need to redress the balance. We need to reduce livestock consumption. It's not going to eliminate it. There's still going to be animals around our farm. There are good instances and plenty of farms able to show that animals can be integrated into arable systems quite effectively, but there's going to be a lot less. So in the practical sense, yes, it's very much doable. I mean, we've got loads of data going back 4 decades or more to show that practically, agronomically, it's perfectly possible, but it's really about, for want of a better expression, diet modification, which means that people can have to eat a lot less animal products, a lot more fruit and vegetables, which everybody tells us is the right thing to do anyway. So yes, we have chosen to eliminate livestock initially for practical agronomic reasons, but it's also become something of an ethic as well over many decades.
And Matthias, I mean, your primary product is hay. So I guess you have a slightly different relationship and thought process around what livestock should be doing within the farming sector.
Yeah, so as I think I am saying, same experience here, meaning at individual farm level, you do not have to have farm animals for this farm to run and deliver regenerative outcomes, which is an example of our farm. But animals are part of farming and are part of the ecosystem and are an important part of that. Sharing our experience, of course, it's kind of obvious, but it's good to say obvious things. Our primary customers are people who own animals. And the way we position our farm on the market is that, hey, we are specialized in hay production. It takes a skill to do that. And those farmers that we are working with, when they do the numbers on their own of doing hay for their own purposes, they are saying, hey, what we are buying from you, even though it seems to be expensive, if we were to do it on our own, it would be 3 times more expensive. Plus, it would take us from what we are, doing well, and we would need people in peak times that is really throwing everything off. So this word partnerships come to mind, that we enable that. And also, in a reality in which you do have shocks, including climate shocks or weather shocks, we have more and more situations in which in that region of Poland or in that part of the world, like in Norway in 2018, you have a drought or you have a flood, you have a supply shock, and there's a need for a food product somewhere, and then we feed in that need from hay supply. So that's the relationship, how it looks like right now. Thinking about the future of the farm, one of the things we would love to do is we would love to have animals on the farm, but it is clear that the current management team and operational team of the farm will not be doing that. So the UK model that you probably both are very well familiar with, I am somehow familiar with, of having a farm on a farm that kind of brings animals and grazes, or even does that all year round, is something that we would love to develop, but we are not in the UK, so we don't have the whole ecosystem that enables that. We are working on that by speaking and supporting younger farmer entrants to develop their skills and saying, hey, once you want to develop this kind of enterprise or vegetable garden within our farm mass, like come over, the land is there for you, we want to cooperate with you. but it is clear we don't want to run operationally those kind of enterprises within the farm.
So let's start taking a few questions. So we've got some, anybody who's got some burning questions. There's a chap in the middle who's got his hands up there, specs on the top of his head.
There's for you.
Thank you. Sheila, you raised an interesting point, or from my perspective, of that you were previously organic, but then you had this transition to biodiverse nature logic. Speak to that some more, if you please, because I think it's part of what regenerative agriculture is, and it's a whole new way of thinking. And it isn't just about being organic or non-chemical. It is about working in harmony with nature, I think, as opposed to trying to dominate it.
Yes. So when I took over the farm about in 2015, I felt it's not yet good enough. Like the state of the soil, I felt it should be like in the forest, and I was wondering, why is it not? Like that should be our way, our measure in a way. And I just started observing what plants do we have in the farm? Do they produce enough organic matter to have a very thick layer of mulch in a way? And I came to realize that the natural way of plants growing is not in a monoculture, and it's neither just two types that we have had olives and oranges. So it's like, why do we try to grow against nature? Like on my farm, mulberries and fig trees started growing, and everybody told me I should cut them. So nature had this tendency of bringing more diversity, and we were told as farmers, no, it's not how you farm. Why would I farm in a different way than what is ideal for plants? So that was one of our thinkings. And just understanding that we have destroyed our ecosystem so much. And as you also said, farmers in Greece are managing about 45.5% of the whole territory. So we need to gain, again, this knowledge of how to regenerate and how to manage those ecosystems in a way healthy. And I think current organic practices, they don't go far enough. We need to do a lot of work to regenerate the biodiversity, the soils, the water cycles. Yeah.
And I'll come on to this as well with you in a moment. Have you had somebody look at your soil and how it's actually changed since changing the way that you're farming it? What's actually happened to the soil on your farm?
Yeah, so I think it's the first thing that everybody who is like into this way of farming looks at is actually the soil. Like we all want to go on a farm and just put our hands into the soil. But we saw that we have a lot of more organic matter in the soil. We can store a lot more water. The water storage capacity of the soil has changed a lot. We have a lot more earthworms than we had before. A lot of fungi because we have so much organic matter. These are some of the most obvious observations that we have.
And Ian, I mean, I've been on your farm. You do like earthworms. It's a big part of what you do. But you've also had a study done actually looking at the carbon that's being sequestered into your soil, which I know you said would have been an amazingly expensive thing to have done, but that was done as a research thing. What did they actually find? And how quickly is carbon being sequestered into your soil?
Right, well, this is a really interesting question, and I could spend the rest of the day answering it, so I'm going to have to try and be brief. We were very lucky to have AgriCarbon, who are one of the sponsors of this event, by the way, and I don't know if someone's here, but thank you very much to AgriCarbon. They turned up at our farm 2.5 years ago because they'd heard about our rather unique farming system. Look, no inputs apart from what we grow on the farm. So they wanted to check our deep carbon levels. The carbon went way down to 1 metre deep. We had the fantastic opportunity of being able to check this against my neighbouring farmer, literally next door, on the same soil type, also organic, but in long-term grass. Now, in the back of my slightly paranoid mind, I was worried that after 40 years, we were mining carbon from our soils and losing it. Organic matter levels have been stable, but we weren't sure about the long-term carbon. So analysis was looking at both my own farm and my neighbour's farm, 150 samples, so very, very diverse. What we were able to compare, and it was really significant, was that on our farm, which has been continually under cultivation now for 40 years, with lots of vegetable crops, lots of food grown, we had significantly more deep carbon way down at a metre than my neighbouring grassland farm. We also had a different bulk soil density, so the compression factor of the soil was also more favourable. So it wasn't hugely different, but it was definitely on the positive side. So what we were able to conclude was that in general, our carbon levels were just slightly better than my neighbours after a lot of very intensive farming, but also after producing a large amount of food compared with my neighbour. This was something which, to me, was like manna from heaven, because I kind of felt at last we had some assurance that what we were doing was right and we weren't mining our carbon levels. We've seen huge changes in our earthworm population. You know, we've gone from 50 a square metre to 1,500. We've seen huge changes in nutrient availability, despite the fact we've put nothing in from outside the farm at all during that time. So we've got the soil working for itself and regenerating itself.
And very briefly, that thing of not having external inputs, you're producing your own green manures on the farm and you're planting specifically to get nutrients deep into the soil, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah, the reason we have carbon deep down is because we have deep rooting plants. We have chicory, lucerne. We've also introduced trees. We now have almost 20% of our farm is growing trees. So from that, we're producing a lot of carbon, which is also going back onto the ground. So we've kind of internalized the carbon of the farm to just generate its own carbon level to maintain and slightly improve. We're not making huge claims about massive carbon positives, but it's definitely in the right size of where it should be. So we're not saying we've doubled our carbon content in 50 years, nothing like it, but we have increased it by a small margin, and we've produced a lot of food in the process.
Great stuff. Okay, hands up. Who's got a question? Okay, there's a...
Hi, my name is Sam Wisse. I'm from the Netherlands Farmers Organization. Ian, you mentioned the point where you said, like, we cannot put pre-industrial levels of carbon back into 20 years. I think it's a very good point that you can make steps, but we cannot go back in easily 200 years ago. But what is for you why do you think these ideas come into existence for such a short term?
So I didn't quite get the last part of your question.
That you think it's impossible to do that. Mm-hmm. We can do our best, but why do you think these ideas come into existence?
Well, I think the ideas come into existence because of the crisis we're facing and the need to be obviously putting carbon back. We have to look at the whole of the carbon cycle, not just what happens on farms, but what else goes on. I don't think it's realistic to think that we can carry on business as usual and dump the responsibility of carbon on farmers, because they are only part of that problem. So it's not going to be business as usual. We have to decarbonise our whole society, and that includes farming as well. Farming obviously takes up a lot of space, it takes up a lot of potential carbon, and it has got some real benefits, but we're not going to do it in 20 years, unfortunately. I mean, just to measure carbon over that period of time is quite challenging. 5 years really is the minimum you can actually measurably get any sensible data from soil carbon stocks. So it is going to be a long period of time, and we have to look at farms as part of that solution. We have to look at farms in terms of reducing how much carbon they use. I mean, the nitrogen cycle, for example, if we just cut out nitrogen fertilizer, that saves a huge amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So it's not just about thinking farms as a carbon sink. We have to think about farms also as a way of reducing how much carbon they put into food production in the first place. Industrialization of food, ultra-processed foods, the transportation of food, this all takes carbon. The whole food story uses up a huge amount of carbon. So I think looking at agriculture is not enough. We need to look at the whole system of food production beyond agriculture as well.
Hands up. Chap over there.
Hello, I'm Axel Don, soil scientist from the Thünen Institute. I'm very impressed by all the three of you, what you're doing at your farms. So for me, carbon farming is a vehicle to less greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. So reducing the CO2 footprint of your products. So I wonder if you know how much CO2 you're producing or greenhouse gas emissions with your products, if you know from which processes they're coming from, and if you did something to reduce it. Is it a topic in your farms?
Sheila, do you want to go first on that? I think that's a no. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, we have. We started measuring our carbon picture on the farm almost 20 years ago, before it was really fashionable, because I kind of felt it was an interesting subject. It varies from year to year. It varies enormously. We don't do it every year. It's a big job, but we do have much more data now than we had 20 years ago. We've got some quite reliable programs we can use. We are part of a carbon farming program, which looks at carbon on farms. Basically, what it boils down to within our business, whether we're carbon neutral or carbon positive depends on how much money we spend on equipment and machinery on the farm. It's as simple as that. You know, we could go and buy a brand new tractor next year, and that will write off our carbon positive for the next decade. Or we can carry on using old tractors, which is what we tend to do, and lose that carbon input. So it's very much about how much we spend on the farm. The areas that we did look at, the prime users of carbon on our farm are electricity. Although it's a relatively small part of the business, it actually exerts quite a large carbon footprint on the planet. So electricity is something we needed to save. We were able to show that we were gaining some carbon in the soil, so that was a positive. But overall, some years we're carbon positive, some years we're hugely carbon negative. It does vary enormously. So it's not a picture which you can see gradually from year to year developing. It's a very much a changing picture. The weather has a big impact on what we farm and how we farm as well, and what we use during that cycle. So it's not straightforward, but it is practical. It is possible to measure carbon input and carbon export on the farm, and I think every farm should be doing this. It concentrates your mind very clearly on where you need to make some big changes. I think that's the value in carbon footprinting on farms, is that you can see where you need to really exercise more effort.
And Matthias?
For us, so once again, two sides of the equation, the sequestration and emissions. On sequestration, the whole land is sequestering by being green and having living roots. We are working on what from sequestration numbers right now are numbers that you don't see, but they can bring a lot of sequestration in the future, which is the agroforestry system. Rewetting and restoration of peatlands. We are farming some peatlands that are degraded, and we are in some early conversations about bringing that, rewetting that effectively. So that's on the sequestration side. On the emission side, our emissions are of course from fuel that we use, from very few inputs that we use, the twine for baling, straw, the acid that we use to conserve the hay. All of that has input to it, but we are not using any fertilizers nor chemicals. So that, which is by far the massive, especially the fertilizers emission number on a normal farm, like we don't have that in our accounting. So net, according to the Cool Farm tool, we are sequestering 4,500 tons of CO2 equivalent at the farm level. So that those are the numbers. We also have, thank you, Ian, for kind of making me realize that we do have solar panels on the farm. We are heating the water with the sun. We are also using residues from other farms left after cleaning grain, especially rapeseed, to heat our farm buildings rather than buying coal or producing wood chips, especially for that. So we are using waste stream for that, and it's just working amazing. So that's the emissions perspective or reality from our farm. Where I would invite you to go further, I think, with the potential of carbon farming, it's not only about the lowest greenhouse gas number. Like for me, carbon farming is an entry point that works right now to talk more broadly about regenerative agriculture. And principle number one of regenerative agriculture for me is optimization of inputs. So if you are not applying something that you should be to get the ecosystem to where it should be from a healthy perspective, do it. Of course, that will lead you to emissions now, but then you are getting to a healthy system, to a new operating model. So that also comes to mind that I wanted to share.
So I just want to bring us back to to an acronym that we talked about right at the beginning, MRV, Measurement, Reporting, Validation, because that's really crucial to all the stuff that we've just been talking about there. If we're going to get to a position where the Common Agricultural Policy, or whatever the UK equivalent of that is going to start rewarding farmers for sequestering carbon in some way, or how they manage their land, you have to have mechanisms for actually doing that. You have to be able to measure where you're at for a baseline. You have to see how it's changed over time. You have to have people come on the farm and tick the boxes so that you can get the money. What do you see as being the major issues around all of that? Because you need to have an army of people to do that, and there's a huge difference between olive and orange growing in the south of Greece to vegetable farming in Oxfordshire to hay farming in Poland. They're completely radically different environments that you're asking people to come into. So Sheila, perhaps we'll start with you. What are the key things you want sort of policymakers and researchers to be thinking about when they're thinking about framing how we do some of that MRV stuff?
Yeah, so I think at this point I have to agree with Tristano. I feel it's way too early to speak about how to measure the positive outcomes when we haven't even created really a supportive ecosystem for farmers to change their practices. Like at this point in Greece, there are barely any agronomists, maybe 5 I can count on my hands, that would have the possibility to consult a farmer in how to do better practices. And we already go to the measuring and trying to develop frameworks. But I think we really have to look at what is actually, because also the title of this talk is the role of innovating farmers, but I would like to ask, what is the role of everybody else around the innovating farmers? How can we create an ecosystem for farmers where they can be innovative? And they can't be innovative if there's nobody in reach or in sight that would have any kind of ideas about soil, about biodiversity. Like I think we are at the moment focusing not on the right side. We need to really analyze what are the dynamics and forces that a farmer is exposed to that are influencing his decisions. For me, we need innovation hubs in every region, which they already exist. In Greece, at least, we created a network of eco-projects, we call them, but it's basically innovation hubs in rural areas. And it's resilient places where people don't operate with programs or a lot of money, but they just try to find solutions and bring them to their local areas. And if I look at my transition path, this is what helped me to find in the first place to hear about permaculture, about regenerative agriculture. So I think we really need to look again at rural areas and at all the crises that are colliding there. Brain drain, depopulation, precarious governance. We have all of these crises that farmers are exposed to, and we need to look at the dynamics. And one elephant in the room for me are agronomists. I see a lot of farmers, they want our advice and our support in transitioning, but then essentially they need an agronomist in their region supporting them through the transition, and at the moment they don't exist in most of rural Europe. So I think before we look at MRV, we need to look at how to create this ecosystem around farmers so that they can do better choices.
And Matthias, you were making some furious notes there.
So
what are you thinking?
So your question assumes that we want to take this path, and I share that vision, but it's a question. That's a question itself. Hey, do we want to take this path? Yes, we do, and I think, technically speaking, we have all the pieces in place to make this reality of paying for results come true. We don't have this reality yet. Maybe it's too early to talk about pricing, as Tristan was saying at the beginning, but the pieces are there, and the job is to accelerate the pieces that need acceleration and create a framework for the system to work. So you ask about, hey, what should policymakers and what should researchers do specifically? 2 very simple invitations. For policymakers, at least those that I know, the level of ambition is not clear. It is not crystal clear in their narrative. Hey, we want to get there. We want to get to, for example, a cap that is result-based in that form or in that other shape. The pieces for that are there. The level of ambition is not there. We are wishy-washy when it comes to, okay, what should CAP deliver? It should deliver very big things, but how do you really square that? Or how do we change, therefore, what we have to get there? That conversation is not happening. So set the level of ambition. We are changing from result-based payments in which we are now to result-based payments. And we start from this action to get us there, not to complete it, but to be the first step on that journey. As for the researchers, please, 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 as a farmer, keep it simple. That's what comes to mind straight away. And I think what summarizes those both invitations is the invitation that you will hear me say all the time, and I mean that, and all of us, I think, are open for that, is please visit the farmer. This is what really needs to happen. If you are a researcher, if you are a policymaker, especially if you are a policymaker, go out and visit the farm. Amazing if it's a regenerative farm. It can be just visit the farm and make it a habit to visit the farm. We need those bridges.
And Ian, quick thought from you.
Yeah, it's a very important point raised here, so I won't go into too much of what's already been covered, but I would put soil health as at the very root of everything. I was lucky to go to EU Brussels a couple of years ago and present a case for farmers to monitor soil health. There's a big movement within EU Commission to try and get farmers to think about soil. So this is the really most important thing, get farmers thinking about soil. They're going to need, as we've heard from both people here, they're going to need a lot of support to do that. You can't just suddenly change farmers without support, and those support mechanisms have largely been lost. You know, the economists don't understand soil, they don't understand the chemistry, they don't understand the biology. So we're really going to have to train a whole lot of people in order to get to this point where we can help, encourage and support farmers. In UK, we lost our EU money a couple of 3 years ago with Brexit, but we've actually got something which has actually turned out to be better. We are paying farmers now in UK not to produce food, we are paying farmers to look after the environment and produce food at the same time. So there's been a change in the way the subsidies have gone. The subsidies are really about not trashing the planet any longer or trashing the farm. The subsidies are more towards looking after the farm, looking after biodiversity, looking after soil, but still producing food as part of that. So, you know, we need a complete new program of training. We need new research and demonstration farms. We need to get this back into the farming calendar. We need to take farmers with this. Farmers can't be ignored. They have to be looked after in the best possible way.
So, amazingly, it's very nearly 10 o'clock. We've got about 2 minutes just to kind of wrap things up. It's been a fascinating discussion at stuff. I just want from each of you a kind of like one idea that you want the people in this room to take away. So each of you, as an innovative farmer, you've changed the way that you do things for a whole bunch of reasons. What's the one message you want everybody in this room to take away with them? And Matthias, I know you've already said yours, so I want you to reiterate it. What is it you want people to do?
Thank you. It's good to restate what has been said already so that it sticks. Visit the farmer. Like if now is the time for you to open your calendar and put a note of half an hour for Friday or for Monday to look up the farmer and then follow that up, please do it. But I would like everyone that is present in the third EU Carbon Farming Summit to have been on the farm before coming to the summit. And I'm very happy Ian mentioned soil health as a topic. This is really the topic. Like if carbon farming is to deliver on something, it's on soil health. There is EU mission, one of the 5 missions, soil mission. If you don't know it yet, look it up, sign the manifesto, consider being part of the consortium that is using those money for advancing soil health, not only in agriculture, but in different land uses.
Okay.
And as you do that, put land users at the center of whatever you are doing, the farmer, the forester. That's that.
And Sheila.
Yes. I would like to put the thought out there that real change often happens outside of EU structures, programs, schemes. And yeah, just as was already said, visit a farm, but more than visit a farm, I would say really immerse yourself into the reality that you want to change. And like this also solve the crisis of the rural areas. If you're all are based in big cities, how do you want to understand the realities that farmers are exposed to and find the real leverage points for change? I know it's very uncomfortable what I'm saying, but for me, this is how we're going to achieve change.
Okay, and a final word from you then, Ian.
Well, on top of these two really good points, I want to add biodiversity. So if you're farming, you are obviously in control of biodiversity. You need to look at your biodiversity. You don't need to become an expert. It would be great if you could, but it's a hugely complex subject. But just to get impassioned and infused by biodiversity, I think is really important because it will lead you and teach you things. I look at earthworms. For me, they're the great teacher of what we do on our soils. So, if you start with the earthworm, you can take it from there. You don't, as I say, don't have to be an expert, but biodiversity is so critical to everything we do on this planet. You need to know something about it.
Lovely. We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Tristano, when he told me the three people that we're going to have on the stage, he said, I picked them because they're kind of rock stars in what they do. They really are. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthias Cicinoka, Ian Tolhurst, Sheila Damos, thank you all ever so much.